The town of Silent Hollows was shrouded in an eternal twilight. A thick fog, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, clung to everything. It rolled in from the woods, a sprawling, ancient expanse that pressed against the town's edges like a malevolent entity. The trees stood tall and skeletal, their branches gnarled and twisted, their leaves long gone, leaving them bare and menacing against the oppressive sky. Silent Hollows was a town forgotten by time. Its inhabitants were few, their faces weathered and etched with a weariness that spoke of long-held secrets. They kept to themselves, their eyes wary, their voices hushed. The silence was pervasive, broken only by the mournful cry of a distant owl or the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. The town was a place of shadows and whispers, where the past lingered like a ghost. It was a place where the living dared not speak of the dead, and the dead refused to stay buried. It was in this desolate and forgotten corner of the world that the old Blackwood Manor stood, its silhouette a jagged wound against the unforgiving horizon. They arrived on a day when the fog was so thick it felt like being swallowed whole. The air was heavy with moisture and visibility was reduced to mere feet ahead. It was as if the world had shrunk to just the two of them and the looming silhouette of the mansion. Daniel and Sarah, young and brimming with the naive optimism of those who have never truly known fear, were enchanted. They saw potential where others saw decay, and adventure where others saw danger. The old house, with its crumbling facade and overgrown gardens, held a certain romantic appeal. The ivy-clad walls and broken windows whispered stories of a bygone era, and the couple felt drawn to uncover its secrets. It was a project, a challenge, a chance to build a life together within the walls of history. They imagined restoring its former glory, room by room, and filling it with new memories. Sarah had breathed, her eyes sparkling as she stepped out of the car. The excitement was palpable, a mix of anticipation and the thrill of the unknown. She reached for Daniel's hand, her touch sending a jolt of excitement through him. It was a silent promise, a commitment to face whatever lay ahead together. He squeezed her hand, his gaze sweeping over the imposing structure before them. The mansion seemed to watch them back, its dark windows like eyes peering into their souls. Even through the fog, the house held a certain grandeur, a faded elegance that hinted at a time when it had been filled with life and laughter. The echoes of the past seemed to linger in the air, waiting to be rediscovered. They had purchased the house for a pittance, a steal considering its size and history. It was a dream come true, a chance to own a piece of history. The realtor had been quick to point out its unique character and charming imperfections. The creaky floors, the drafty windows, all added to its allure. He had neglected to mention the unsettling feeling that permeated the very air around it, the sense of being watched by unseen eyes. It was as if the house itself was alive, aware of their presence. As they unloaded their belongings, the last rays of the weak sun slipped below the horizon, plunging the house into an unsettling gloom. The shadows seemed to stretch and grow, enveloping the house in a blanket of darkness. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. The only sound was the occasional creak of the old house settling, a reminder of its age and history. Daniel could have sworn he heard a faint sigh echo through the empty halls, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. "It's perfect," he whispered, more to himself than to Sarah. They had no idea what awaited them within those walls, but they were ready to face it together. The Blackwood Manor was a labyrinth of dark hallways and cavernous rooms, each one imbued with a sense of forgotten tragedy. The walls seemed to whisper secrets of the past, and the floors creaked under the weight of untold stories. Dust lay heavy on every surface, cobwebs hung like macabre decorations, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something indefinable and unsettling. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing in the memories of those who had once walked its halls. Daniel threw himself into the task of restoring the house, his enthusiasm a shield against the growing unease that gnawed at the edges of his mind. He believed that with enough effort, he could bring life back to the manor, banishing the shadows that clung to its corners. Sarah, however, was drawn to the house's mysteries. She spent her days exploring its hidden nooks and crannies, poring over old documents and yellowed photographs she found tucked away in dusty corners. Each discovery was a piece of a larger puzzle, a glimpse into the lives of the Blackwood family. She learned of the Blackwood family, their triumphs and tragedies, their loves and betrayals. The more she uncovered, the more she felt a connection to the people who had once called the manor home. She learned of the artist, Julian Blackwood, whose portraits had once graced the walls of the manor, and whose presence still lingered within its walls. His art was a window into his soul, each brushstroke a testament to his passion and torment. It was Sarah who discovered the hidden room. Concealed behind a bookshelf in the library, its entrance masked by years of dust and neglect, it was as if the room itself didn't want to be found. The discovery felt like a turning point, a moment when the past reached out to touch the present. The door creaked open with a tortured groan, revealing a small airless space lit by a single dusty window. The light that filtered through was weak, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. The walls were lined with canvases, each one covered in a thick layer of dust. It was clear that these paintings had been hidden away for a reason, their secrets buried beneath layers of neglect. As Sarah stepped into the room, a cold gust of wind slammed the door shut behind her, plunging her into darkness. The sudden change was jarring, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She cried out, her heart pounding against her ribs. The silence that followed was oppressive, pressing in on her from all sides. Panic surged through her, hot and suffocating. She could feel the walls closing in, the air growing thinner with each passing second. She fumbled for the doorknob, her fingers closing around cold, unyielding metal. The door refused to budge, trapping her in the darkness with only her racing thoughts for company. She knew she had to stay calm, but the fear was overwhelming, threatening to consume her. The darkness was absolute, pressing in on Sarah from all sides. It was as if the very air around her had thickened, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. She felt as though she was drowning in an ocean of black, with no light to guide her, no hope to cling to. She could hear her own ragged breathing, the frantic thumping of her heart. Each beat echoed in her ears, a reminder of her own vulnerability in this oppressive void. The darkness seemed to amplify every sound, every fear. She felt the weight of the room's secrets closing in on her, the whispers of the past brushing against her skin like icy fingers. It was as if the very walls were alive, holding memories and sorrows that were now reaching out to her, trying to pull her into their cold embrace.
Is anyone there? Her voice was small, almost swallowed by the darkness, but she had to try. She had to know if she was truly alone in this suffocating void.
Her voice trembled, barely more than a whisper itself. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that seemed to stretch on forever. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. It was as if the room itself was reacting to her presence, growing more hostile, more unwelcoming. For a moment, it seemed as though the room itself was holding its breath, waiting. The tension was palpable, a living thing that wrapped around her, squeezing the air from her lungs. Then, from the shadows, came a voice, soft and mournful. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling the room with its sorrowful tone.
You should not have come here. The words were a warning, a plea and a threat all at once.
Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The voice was so close it felt as though it was whispering directly into her ear. The voice was close, too close. She turned, eyes straining to see in the darkness, but there was nothing. No figure, no shadow, just the oppressive blackness. Only the voice and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. It was a sensation that made her skin crawl, as if invisible hands were reaching out to touch her. She trembled, her body reacting to the unseen presence that seemed to surround her. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling her mind with their chilling words.
Who are you? What do you want? Her voice was stronger now, fueled by a mix of fear and defiance. She needed answers, needed to understand what was happening.
The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. It was as if the very air had turned to lead, pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. Then the voice spoke again, a note of desperation creeping into its tone. It was a sound that spoke of long-forgotten sorrows and unfulfilled desires.
Leave this place, before it's too late. The urgency in the voice was unmistakable, a final warning that sent a shiver down her spine.
Sarah's fingers finally found the doorknob, turning it with a frantic twist. The metal was cold and unyielding, but she forced it to move. The door swung open, and she stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for breath. The air outside the room was a relief, but it was still thick with the weight of the house's presence. The darkness seemed to retreat, the oppressive weight lifting, but it was not gone, merely lurking, waiting for another chance to close in. But the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following her every move, lingered. It was a sensation that would not easily be shaken off. She knew deep down that the house had awakened, and it would not rest until its secrets were uncovered. The whispers, the voices, they were all part of a larger story, one that she was now inexorably a part of.